The dust swirled in angry golden clouds as the stagecoach rattled along the rutted trail, leaving Dorothy Wells clutching the worn leather seat beneath her, while her wedding dress, once pristine white, now bore the grime of 3 days' travel. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, not from the dust, but from the crushing reality of what awaited her at journey's end. Marriage to a man she'd never met. A cattle baron 30 years her senior, who had selected her through a mail-order bride advertisement. The year was 1876, and the untamed territories of Arizona offered little mercy to a woman traveling alone. The afternoon sun hung low on the horizon, painting the desert landscape in hues of amber and crimson. Dorothy had left behind everything familiar in Philadelphia after her father's death, left her with nothing but debts and desperate choices. "Almost to the crossing, folks," called the driver, his weathered voice barely audible above the creak of wheels and the thundering hooves. "Might be some trouble ahead. Raiders been spotted in these parts." Dorothy's fellow passengers, a salesman with nervous eyes and a mother with her sleeping child, exchanged worried glances. The salesman leaned toward the window, peering anxiously at the horizon. "I paid good money for safe passage," he muttered. "They assured me." His words dissolved into a startled cry as the stagecoach lurched violently. The sound of gunfire cracked through the air like lightning. Dorothy's heart hammered against her ribs as the coach pitched sideways, sending her tumbling against the opposite seat. "Indians!" the mother shrieked, clutching her child. "Bandits!" the driver shouted back. "Hold on!" The coach accelerated, bouncing mercilessly over the uneven terrain. Dorothy could hear the pounding hooves of pursuing horses. Another shot rang out, followed by a terrible splintering sound as a bullet struck the coach. "Give them what they want," the salesman cried, fumbling with his pocket watch. "My goods aren't worth my life." The driver's reply was lost in a cacophony of shouting and gunfire. The coach swerved sharply, nearly tipping over before righting itself. Dorothy's hands trembled as she gripped the window frame, trying to glimpse their pursuers. 4 men on horseback, bandanas covering their faces, were gaining on them. Without warning, the coach door flew open. The salesman, his face contorted with terror, grabbed Dorothy by the arm. "They want valuables," he hissed, eyes wild with fear. "You're wearing that ring. They'll kill us all for it." Dorothy recoiled, clutching her mother's heirloom ring, the last memento of her family. "No, you cannot." But the man was beyond reason. With surprising strength, he yanked her toward the door. "Better one sacrifice than all of us." "Stop!" the mother screamed, but it was too late. Dorothy felt herself airborne for one terrifying moment before crashing into the hard-packed earth. Pain exploded through her body as she tumbled, her wedding dress tearing, her vision blurring with dust and shock. The coach didn't slow instead, it accelerated, the driver perhaps unaware in the chaos that a passenger had been thrown out. As the sound of the coach faded, Dorothy lay stunned, the taste of blood and dirt in her mouth. Darkness was falling quickly, the sun now just a sliver on the horizon. She tried to rise but collapsed with a gasp as pain shot through her ankle. Hoofbeats approached not the thundering charge of the bandits, but a steady, purposeful rhythm. Dorothy's heart seized with terror. Had they returned for her? With trembling hands, she dragged herself toward a cluster of rocks, praying for invisibility in the gathering dusk. The rider appeared silhouetted against the darkening sky, a lone figure, tall in the saddle. Not one of the bandits, she realized with a flicker of hope. This man wore no bandana, and his broad-brimmed hat marked him as a cowboy rather than a raider. He dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs jingling softly as he approached. Dorothy pressed herself against the rocks, uncertain whether to call out or remain silent. "You hurt, madam?" His voice was deep, with the rough edges of someone who spent more time with cattle than people. Dorothy swallowed hard. "My ankle," she managed. "I think it might be broken." He knelt beside her, and in the fading light, she could make out his features, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes narrowed with concern. He couldn't have been more than 30, with shoulders broadened by years of hard work. "Stage left you behind," he said, not a question but an observation tinged with disgust. "Saw it tear past from the ridge, then saw them bandits change direction after it. Figured something happened." "They threw me out," Dorothy whispered, the reality of her abandonment hitting her anew. The salesman. He feared they would kill us all for valuables. The cowboy's jaw tightened. Coward's way. Let me see that ankle. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined her injury. Sprained bad, not broken. You're lucky, but you can't walk on it. Dorothy glanced around at the empty desert, now bathed in the purple light of dusk. What will happen to me? She asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. The cowboy studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn wedding dress, her dirt-smeared face, the desperation in her eyes. Then he nodded, as if coming to a decision. You're mine now, he said simply, his voice leaving no room for argument. Can't leave you out here for the wolves or worse. My ranch is half a day's ride. I'll get you there. See to that ankle. Yours? Dorothy repeated, bristling despite her predicament. I belong to no one, sir. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Figure of speech, madam. Though out here without help, you'd be vulture food by morning. I'm Samuel Hawkins. Most folks call me Sam. Dorothy hesitated, then nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. Dorothy Wells. I was to be married in Silver Creek, to Mr. Henderson. Old Calvin Henderson? Sam's expression darkened. The cattle baron? You know him? Know of him? His reputation rides ahead of him. Sam stood and whistled. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, trotted obediently to his side. Can you hold on to me if I put you up in the saddle? Dorothy nodded, though uncertainty must have shown on her face. Don't worry, Sam said, his voice softening. I won't harm you, but we need to move. Those bandits might circle back. And there's mountain lions get hungry this time of night. With careful movements, he lifted her, mindful of her injured ankle, and placed her on the saddle. Dorothy gasped at the intimacy of a stranger's touch, but the cowboy's demeanor remained respectful. He swung up behind her, one arm securely around her waist. Hold tight to the pommel, he instructed. It's rough country between here and home. As they rode into the gathering darkness, Dorothy found herself overwhelmed by the strange turn her life had taken. Hours ago, she'd been resigned to a loveless marriage of convenience. Now she was pressed against a stranger, whose warmth seemed to seep through her tattered dress, headed to an unknown destination. Mr. Hawkins? She ventured after they had ridden in silence for some time. Why did you come back for me? You could have simply ridden on. The cowboy was quiet for so long that Dorothy thought he might not answer. Then his deep voice rumbled against her back. My ma taught me a person's worth isn't measured by what's easy, but by what's right. Leaving someone helpless in the desert ain't right. Not ever. They rode on through the star-filled night, the rhythmic motion of the horse lulling Dorothy despite her pain and fear. Behind her, Sam Hawkins remained vigilant, his eyes scanning the darkness for dangers as they made their way toward the promise of safety. Dawn broke in a riot of colors across the eastern sky as they crested a rise overlooking a broad valley. In the distance, Dorothy could make out a cluster of buildings, a substantial ranch house, a barn, and various outbuildings, all nestled against the backdrop of purple mountains. Shadowbrook Ranch, Sam said, his breath warm against her ear. Been in my family for 20 years. It ain't much, but it's home. Dorothy straightened, taking in the sight. After the endless expanse of desert they had traversed, the ranch appeared like an oasis of civilization. It looks wonderful, she said honestly, her voice raspy from thirst and exhaustion. Sam chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against her back. You might be the first person to say that about my place. Most folks think it's too rough by half. As they approached, Dorothy could see figures moving about the yard, ranch hands starting their day's work. A young boy spotted them first, raising a hand in greeting before rushing toward the main house. That's Toby, Sam explained. Orphan boy I took in 3 winters back. Smartest kid with horses I've ever seen. By the time they reached the yard, several people had gathered. An older woman with silver-streaked dark hair hurried forward, her expression shifting from concern to curiosity as she caught sight of Dorothy in her torn wedding dress. Samuel Hawkins? What in tarnation? She demanded, hands on her hips. Found her tossed from the stage, Maria, Sam explained, dismounting before carefully helping Dorothy down. Bandits were after them. The others threw her out like she was cargo. Maria's weathered face softened with sympathy. Poor child. Bring her inside. That ankle needs tending. Dorothy found herself swept into the house and settled on a worn but clean sofa, while Maria bustled about, gathering supplies. The ranch house was simple, but surprisingly homey, with handmade quilts draped over furniture and the scent of fresh-baked bread lingering in the air. "Maria's been with us since I was knee-high," Sam explained, hovering awkwardly by the door. "Best cook in the territory and knows more about healing than any doctor in these parts." "You're very kind," Dorothy said, addressing them both. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks," Maria replied, gently removing Dorothy's boot to examine her swollen ankle. "But I am curious about this wedding dress. You running from something, child?" Dorothy hesitated, looking from Maria to Sam. The events of the past days suddenly crashed over her like a wave, and to her mortification, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was traveling to Silver Creek," she explained between shaky breaths, "to marry Calvin Henderson, a mail order arrangement. My father died last winter, leaving nothing but debts. Mr. Henderson's advertisement promised security." Sam's expression darkened. "Henderson is 60 if he's a day, and not known for his kindness." "I had few options," Dorothy whispered, "but perhaps this was divine intervention. I don't know what to do now." Maria wrapped Dorothy's ankle with practiced efficiency. "What you'll do is rest, heal, then decide. No good decisions come from a place of pain and fear." Sam nodded in agreement. "You can stay as long as you need. We've got a spare room. Once you're mended, we can figure out getting you wherever you want to go." "But Mr. Henderson will be expecting me," Dorothy protested weakly. "Let him expect," Sam said, his jaw set firmly. "Man like that, buying himself a young bride, he can wait a spell longer." Maria finished bandaging Dorothy's ankle and stood. "I'll draw a bath for you, then find you some clean clothes. You look about Sarah's size. She was Samuel's sister, passed 5 years back from the fever." As Maria left the room, an awkward silence fell between Dorothy and Sam. He shifted his weight, hat in hands, looking everywhere but at her. "Thank you," Dorothy said finally. "Truly, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Sam's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a current of understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. "Get some rest, Miss Wells," he said softly. "You're safe now." With that, he placed his hat back on his head and strode from the house, leaving Dorothy to wonder at the strange turn her life had taken and the even stranger feelings stirring within her heart. The next few days passed in a haze of rest and recovery for Dorothy. Maria proved to be both a stern nurse and a compassionate companion, regaling her with stories of the ranch's history and Sam's childhood, while ensuring she stayed off her injured ankle. From her window, Dorothy could observe the daily rhythms of ranch life, the cowboys riding out at dawn and returning dusty and tired at dusk, the constant movement of cattle across the distant pastures, and Sam's commanding presence overseeing it all. She found her eyes drawn to him more often than she cared to admit, watching as he worked alongside his men, his easy authority and quiet strength evident even from a distance. On the 4th morning, Dorothy awoke determined to be useful. Using a walking stick Maria had provided, she made her way carefully to the kitchen where the older woman was kneading dough. "Should you be up?" Maria asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "I cannot lie abed forever," Dorothy replied, settling onto a chair. "Please, let me help with something. I am quite capable with a needle, and I noticed several shirts in need of mending in the basket by the hearth." Maria studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, but mind that ankle." As Dorothy worked on the shirts, most of them Sam's, she noted with a flutter in her stomach, Maria spoke of the challenges of ranch life and the changing territory. "Samuel's father built this place from nothing," she said, punching down the dough with practiced hands. "Came west after the war with nothing but determination and a few good horses. Samuel was just 10 then, already working like a man." "And his mother?" Dorothy asked, carefully mending a tear in a faded blue shirt. "Died on the journey west. Influenza. Left him with Sarah to look after. Barely more than a baby herself." Maria shook her head. "He grew up fast, that boy. Too fast, maybe. He seems solitary," Dorothy observed, choosing her words carefully. Maria's knowing glance made her blush. "He keeps to himself, yes. Not for lack of interest from the local girls, mind you. But Samuel, He carries responsibilities heavily. The ranch, the hands, young Toby. Doesn't leave much room for courting. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of boots on the porch. The door swung open to reveal Sam, his face flushed from exertion, hat in hand. "Miss Wells," he said, clearly surprised to see her up. "Should you be—" "If you ask if I should be up, Mr. Hawkins, I fear I shall throw something at you," Dorothy interrupted, with a smile to soften her words. "I am perfectly capable of sitting and sewing." A slow smile spread across Sam's face, transforming his usually serious expression. "Fair enough, though I'd rather not have anything thrown at me. I've been on the receiving end of Maria's wooden spoon enough times to learn that lesson." "And deserved every whack," Maria muttered, though her affection was clear. Sam approached, examining Dorothy's handiwork. "Fine stitching. Never seen my shirts look so proper." "It's the least I can do," Dorothy replied, suddenly aware of how close he stood, the scent of leather and sun-warmed skin enveloping her. Sam cleared his throat. "Got a telegram from Silver Creek," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Henderson's been asking questions about the stage that was attacked. Seems he's mighty impatient for his bride to arrive." Dorothy's hands stilled, the needle poised mid-stitch. The reality she had momentarily forgotten came rushing back. I should write to him? Explain what happened?" "Already did," Sam said, surprising her. "Sent word you were injured in a bandit attack and recuperating here. Didn't give details." "You had no right," Dorothy began, then stopped herself. "Though I suppose I should thank you." "What was his response?" "Hasn't been one yet. Telegram just went out yesterday." Sam rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture Dorothy had come to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "Miss Wells? Dorothy? Are you certain this marriage is what you want?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Maria tactfully removed herself from the kitchen, murmuring something about laundry. Dorothy stared at her hands, the gold band that had been her mother's catching the light. "Want has little to do with it, Mr. Hawkins. I made a commitment. Mr. Henderson paid for my passage west. He's expecting a bride." "Expecting, yes, but deserving?" Sam's voice hardened. "Henderson's reputation isn't just about being old, Dorothy. He's buried 2 wives already. Neither lasted more than 3 years. Dorothy's head snapped up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there are stories, nothing proven, mind you, but whispers about how both women seem to fade away. Sickly, they said. But both were healthy as horses when they married him." Sam knelt beside her chair. "I'm not trying to frighten you, but you should know what you might be walking into." Dorothy's mind raced. Her father had arranged the marriage before his death, desperate to ensure her security. The letters she'd exchanged with Mr. Henderson had been formal, businesslike, nothing to suggest cruelty, but nothing to suggest warmth either. "What choice do I have?" she whispered. "I have no money, no family, no prospects. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever." Sam's hand covered hers, calloused and warm. "You have choices, more than you know. Just don't rush back to him. Give yourself time." Their eyes locked, and Dorothy felt something tighten in her chest, a recognition, a possibility. Then Sam stood abruptly, breaking the moment. "I should get back to the herd," he said, reaching for his hat. "We're moving them to the north pasture today." After he left, Dorothy sat motionless, her sewing forgotten in her lap, her thoughts in turmoil. For the first time since her father's death, she allowed herself to consider that perhaps there might be another path for her, one not dictated by desperate circumstances or the expectations of others. That evening, as twilight painted the sky in lavender and gold, Dorothy made her way carefully to the porch, drawn by the beauty of the sunset and the need for fresh air after a day indoors. She was surprised to find Sam already there, seated on the steps, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. "Mind some company?" she asked tentatively. Sam looked up, a smile warming his features. "Not at all. Careful on those steps, though." Dorothy settled beside him, leaving a proper distance between them, though she was acutely aware of his presence. "What are you making?" He held up the half-formed carving, the beginnings of a small horse. "For Toby's birthday next week. Boy loves horses more than anything." "It's beautiful," Dorothy said, genuinely impressed by the detail emerging from the wood. "I didn't know you were an artist," Sam chuckled. "Hardly that. Just something my pa taught me. Keeps the hands busy during the long winter nights." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle scrape of Sam's knife against wood and the distant lowing of cattle. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Sam said eventually. "Never been east of the Mississippi myself." Dorothy found herself describing her childhood home, the cobblestone streets, the bustling markets, the changing seasons. She spoke of her father, a kind but impractical man whose investments had dwindled to nothing in his final years, and her mother, dead since Dorothy was 12, but remembered for her love of music and gardens. "It sounds like a different world," Sam said when she finished. "Must be hard, finding yourself here instead." "It was at first," Dorothy admitted, "but there's a beauty to this place I never expected, a freedom despite the hardships." Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's what my pa always said. Out here, a person can remake themselves, be judged by what they do, not where they came from or who their people were." "Is that why you stayed, after your father passed?" "Partly." Sam set aside his carving. "Partly because this land gets in your blood, and partly because I made promises, to my pa, to take care of Sarah, to the hands who depend on me, to myself." "What did you promise yourself?" Dorothy asked softly. Sam looked out at the darkening landscape. "To build something that would last, something good." The simple sincerity of his words touched Dorothy deeply. This man beside her was nothing like the suitors she'd known in Philadelphia, young men concerned with appearances and connections. Sam Hawkins carried responsibility not as a burden, but as a calling, his character forged by hardship into something rare and valuable. "I think you're succeeding," she said quietly. His eyes met hers, and Dorothy felt her breath catch. In the fading light, with the day's labor washed away, Sam's rugged features held a gentleness that made her heart race. "Miss Wells, Dorothy," he began, his voice lower than usual, but whatever he intended to say was interrupted by Toby bursting from the house, his young face alight with excitement. "Sam! Riders coming! Looks like Henderson's men!" The moment shattered. Sam was on his feet instantly, his expression hardening. "How many? How far?" "3 of them. Maybe 10 minutes out," Toby reported, bouncing on his toes. "I saw them from the lookout tree." Sam turned to Dorothy, his eyes searching hers. "You don't have to see them if you don't want to. Could be they're just checking on you, or could be they've come to fetch you back." Dorothy's stomach clenched with anxiety, but she straightened her spine. "I'll see them. Better to know what Mr. Henderson intends." Sam nodded, respect evident in his gaze. "Toby, fetch Maria. Tell her to prepare some coffee for our guests." As Toby darted away, Sam offered Dorothy his hand to help her stand. She took it, feeling the strength in his grip and drawing courage from it. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "remember you have choices. And you have friends here." The riders arrived exactly as Toby had predicted, 3 men on tired horses, dust coating their clothes from the long journey. The leader, a weathered man with a silver mustache and cold eyes, introduced himself as Jenkins, Mr. Henderson's foreman. "We've come for Miss Wells," he announced without preamble, his gaze sliding dismissively over Dorothy. "Mr. Henderson was most distressed to hear of your misfortune, miss. He's sent us to escort you safely to Silver Creek." Dorothy felt Sam stiffen beside her on the porch. "Miss Wells is still recovering," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "Doctor said she shouldn't travel for at least another week." Jenkins' eyes narrowed. "Didn't know there was a doctor out this way, Hawkins." "Dr. Morgan from Copper Springs rode out," Sam lied smoothly. "Miss Wells's ankle was badly sprained in the attack." Dorothy fought to keep her expression neutral, grateful for Sam's intervention. The thought of leaving with these men, of facing a future with a man she'd never met but who inspired such veiled warnings, filled her with dread. "Be that as it may," Jenkins continued, "Mr. Henderson is eager to proceed with the wedding. He suggests Miss Wells recover at his home, where she'll have every comfort." "That's very kind," Dorothy said, finding her voice at last. "But I wouldn't wish to travel until I'm certain I can manage the journey, perhaps in a few more days." Jenkins' mouth tightened beneath his mustache. "Mr. Henderson was quite insistent, miss. He's not a patient man." "Seems to me," Sam drawled, his hand coming to rest casually near the pistol at his hip, "that a man eager to wed would be more concerned with his bride's well-being than his own impatience." The tension crackled between the men. Dorothy could see Jenkins' companions shifting uncomfortably, clearly unwilling to start trouble on another man's property. "Perhaps," Dorothy intervened, "you gentlemen could carry a letter back to Mr. Henderson. I would like to explain my situation personally and assure him of my intention to honor our arrangement once I am fully recovered." Her words, though they cost her to speak, seemed to diffuse the situation. Jenkins nodded stiffly. "That would be acceptable. We'll leave at first light tomorrow. Be sure your letter is ready by then." Maria, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "You men must be hungry after your ride. Come to the kitchen. I've prepared a meal." As Maria led the visitors away, Dorothy sagged against the porch railing, the strength that had sustained her during the confrontation ebbing away. "You handled that well," Sam said quietly. "I lied," Dorothy replied, distressed. "I implied I still intend to marry him, when in truth, the very thought fills me with dread." "You bought time," Sam corrected gently. "There's no shame in that." Dorothy looked up at him, finding unexpected understanding in his gaze. "What will I do, Sam, if what you said about his previous wives is true?" "We'll figure it out," he promised. "Tonight, you'll write that letter. Make it polite but non-committal. Then we'll see what tomorrow brings." Late that night, after the house had fallen silent, Dorothy sat at the small desk in her borrowed room, staring at the blank paper before her. How could she craft words that would delay without refusing, explain without revealing the doubts that now plagued her? A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it a crack, she found Sam standing in the hallway, his expression grave. "May I speak with you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dorothy nodded, opening the door wider but remaining within the proper boundary of her room. "I overheard Jenkins talking with his men," Sam said, his jaw tight with anger. "They have orders to bring you back regardless of your condition. Henderson's planning something. A territorial judge is arriving next week, someone who owes him favors. He intends to have the wedding immediately." Dorothy's hand flew to her throat. "But why such urgency?" "Land," Sam replied grimly. "Your father's name was Jonathan Wells, wasn't it?" Surprised, Dorothy nodded. "How did you know?" "Jenkins mentioned it. Seems your father had claimed a land adjoining Henderson's northern border, prime grazing land with reliable water. Henderson's been trying to get his hands on it for years." "That's impossible," Dorothy protested. "My father owned nothing of value. That's why—" She stopped, the pieces suddenly falling into place. "That's why he arranged the marriage, because he knew he was dying and wanted to secure my future. More likely, Henderson convinced him it was the only way to save you from poverty," Sam said. "Your father probably didn't realize the land's true value." Dorothy sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. "So, Mr. Henderson never wanted me at all, just my father's land." "I'm sorry," Sam said, genuine regret in his voice. "I thought you should know before you wrote that letter." Dorothy stared at the blank paper, a strange calm settling over her. "Thank you for telling me. I know what I need to write now." Sam hesitated, then said quietly, "There's something else. If you're determined not to marry Henderson, and I hope to God you are, you need to be gone before morning. Jenkins won't leave without you." "Gone? But where would I go?" Dorothy asked, panic edging into her voice. Sam's eyes held hers steadily. "I've been thinking on that. My cousin has a place in Colorado Territory, good woman, married to the local sheriff. You'd be safe there while you decide what you want to do next." "You'd help me escape?" Dorothy whispered, amazed by his offer. "I'd do more than that if you'd let me," Sam said, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, I'd make sure you get there safely. It's a 5-day ride, but we could leave tonight, be well away before they realize." Dorothy stood, moving closer to him. "Why would you do this for me, Sam? You barely know me." In the dim lamplight, she could see conflict in his expression. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because I can't stand the thought of you with a man like Henderson." There was more he wasn't saying. Dorothy could sense it in the tension of his shoulders, the careful distance he maintained. But now wasn't the time to press. I'll need an hour to prepare, she said decisively. Can we really slip away unnoticed? Sam nodded. Jenkins and his men are sleeping in the bunkhouse. I'll have horses ready behind the barn. Pack light, just essentials. As he turned to go, Dorothy caught his arm. Sam, thank you. Not just for this, but for everything since you found me in the desert. His hand covered hers briefly, warm and reassuring. 1 hour, he reminded her, then disappeared down the darkened hallway. True to his word, Sam was waiting when Dorothy slipped out the back door an hour later, a small bundle of belongings clutched in her arms. 2 horses stood saddled and ready, and Dorothy was surprised to see Maria there as well, holding a package wrapped in oilcloth. Food for the journey, the older woman explained, pressing the bundle into Dorothy's hands. And some of Sarah's clothes. They'll serve you better than that city dress. I don't know how to thank you, Dorothy began, but Maria waved away her words. Just be careful, both of you. She cast a meaningful glance at Sam. And remember what I told you about choices, child. Sam helped Dorothy mount, careful of her still tender ankle, then swung onto his own horse. With a final wave to Maria, they set off, keeping to the shadows until they were well clear of the ranch buildings. They rode in silence for the first hour, moving steadily northeast toward the mountain passes that would eventually lead them to Colorado. The moon, nearly full, cast enough light to navigate by, and Sam seemed to know the terrain by instinct, guiding them through arroyos and across shallow stream beds that would hide their tracks. Are you managing all right? He asked eventually, drawing his horse alongside hers. We can rest if your ankle's troubling you. I'm fine, Dorothy assured him, though in truth, the unaccustomed hours in the saddle were taking their toll. Better to put as much distance between us and the ranch as possible. Sam studied her face in the moonlight. You're a brave woman, Dorothy Wells. Not brave, she countered, just desperate enough to recognize a true ally when I find one. His smile was quick and genuine. We'll stop at dawn. Rest during the hottest part of the day. Less chance of being spotted that way, too. As promised, when the first pale light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Sam led them to a sheltered hollow nestled among rocks. A small spring bubbled up from the ground, providing fresh water for them and the horses. We should be safe here, he said, helping Dorothy dismount. Jenkins and his men won't discover you're gone until morning, and even then, they'll have to decide whether to chase after us or return to Henderson. Which do you think they'll choose? Dorothy asked, stretching her stiff muscles. Depends how frightened they are of Henderson, Sam replied grimly. Either way, we've got a good head start, and I know these mountains better than they do. Dorothy watched as he efficiently set up a small camp, laying out bedrolls and starting a tiny, nearly smokeless fire to heat coffee. There was a competence to his movements that she found oddly compelling. This was a man who could be relied upon, whose word was his bond. Why aren't you married? Sam, she asked suddenly, then flushed at her own boldness. Forgive me, that was terribly forward. Instead of taking offense, Sam chuckled. No apology needed. It's a fair question, considering you're trusting me with your safety. He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Simple answer is, I never found the right woman. Or maybe I never let myself look. After my pa died and Sarah took sick, the ranch became everything. Didn't seem fair to ask a woman to share that burden. Perhaps the right woman wouldn't see it as a burden, Dorothy suggested softly. Their eyes met over the small fire, and something unspoken passed between them. Sam looked away first, busying himself with checking the horses. You should rest, he said, his voice rougher than before. I'll keep watch. Dorothy obediently settled on her bedroll. But sleep eluded her, despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept returning to the man sitting vigilant nearby, a man who had risked his livelihood and perhaps his life to help a woman who, by all rights, was nothing to him. Or was she? The question followed her into uneasy dreams. They settled into a rhythm over the next few days, traveling by night and early morning, resting during the heat of the day in whatever shelter they could find. Sam proved to be not only a skilled guide, but a surprisingly good cook, making simple but satisfying meals from their provisions and what he could hunt or forage along the way. On the third night, as they made camp in a grove of cottonwoods beside a small creek, Dorothy noticed Sam seemed unusually quiet, his expression distant as he tended the fire. Is something wrong? She asked, settling beside him with a cup of coffee. Are we being followed? Sam shook his head. No sign of pursuit. We should reach Clearwater by tomorrow night. My cousin Ellen will welcome you. You say that as if you won't be staying, Dorothy observed, studying his profile in the firelight. Sam sighed, poking at the embers with a stick. I need to get back to the ranch. The hands can manage for a while, but... He trailed off. But it's your responsibility, Dorothy finished for him. I understand. You've already done more than I had any right to ask. It's not just that, Sam admitted, turning to face her. Henderson isn't the type to let this go. When he discovers I helped you escape, there'll be consequences. Better I'm there to face them directly than leave my people vulnerable. Dorothy's heart sank at the thought of the trouble she'd brought to his door. Perhaps I should have gone with Jenkins after all, written to a lawyer about my father's land instead of running. And risk being forced into marriage before you could? Sam's voice was firm. No, this was the right choice, Dorothy. I just need to prepare for what comes next. What might that be? She asked, fear creeping into her tone. Sam's expression softened as he saw her distress. Nothing for you to worry about. Henderson's influence has limits, even in these territories. And I'm not without friends. They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle burble of the creek and the occasional call of a night bird. Dorothy was acutely aware of Sam beside her, his steady presence, the scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him, the warmth that radiated from his body in the cool night air. Sam, she began hesitantly, when this is over, when Henderson realizes he cannot have my father's land or me, what then? That's for you to decide, he replied. Ellen and her husband will help you get settled. Clearwater's a growing town. They might need a school teacher, or perhaps you have other skills. That's not what I meant, Dorothy said, gathering her courage. I meant, what about us? Sam went very still. Us? Perhaps I'm being presumptuous, she continued, her cheeks burning, but I've felt something between us, something I've never experienced before, and I wondered if perhaps you felt it too. For a long moment, Sam was silent, his eyes fixed on the fire. Then, with deliberate care, he set aside his coffee cup and turned to face her fully. Dorothy, he said, his voice low and intent, I felt it from the moment I found you in the desert. But I had no right to speak of it, not when you were promised to another, not when you were dependent on my help. And now, she whispered. Now I still have no right, he said, though his eyes told a different story. You're only just free of one unwanted commitment. It wouldn't be fair to... Dorothy silenced him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. Samuel Hawkins, in the past week, you have shown me more consideration, more respect, and more genuine caring than any man I've ever known. If that doesn't give you some right to speak your heart, then I don't know what would. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Sam took her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. The simple gesture sent shivers through her entire body. I'm not a wealthy man, he said softly. The ranch turns a profit, but it's a hard life. Long winters, uncertain markets, drought and disease always threatening the herds. It's nothing like the life you must have known in Philadelphia. The life I knew in Philadelphia left me with no choice but to sell myself in marriage to a stranger, Dorothy replied. I think I prefer a hard life freely chosen to an easy one without freedom. Sam's hand came up to cup her cheek, his callous thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I don't want to rush you. When we reach Clearwater, you should take time. Be sure of what you want. And if what I want is to return to Shadowbrook with you, Dorothy asked, leaning slightly into his touch. Then I would be the happiest man in the territory, Sam answered, a smile breaking across his face like sunrise. But the offer stands regardless. You'll always have a home with my cousin if you choose it. Dorothy covered his hand with her own. You are a good man, Samuel Hawkins. I try to be, he said simply. They might have remained that way longer, caught in the tender moment, had a distant sound, not caused Sam to stiffen, his hand dropping to his side. Someone's coming, he whispered, reaching for his rifle. Stay low. Dorothy's heart pounded as Sam moved silently to the edge of their camp, listening intently. After a tense minute, he relaxed slightly. Single rider, he reported, moving slow like they're searching. Could be Henderson's man, could be just a traveler. What should we do? Dorothy asked, already gathering their belongings. Sam considered. We'll move on now, even though it's early. Leave the fire might make them think we're still here while we gain distance. With practiced efficiency, they packed their small camp and saddled the horses. Sam extinguished most of the fire, but left enough embers to maintain the illusion of occupation. Then, leading the horses until they were well away from the creek, they mounted and continued their journey under the star-filled sky. The interruption had broken the intimate mood between them, but Dorothy felt a new certainty in her heart. Whatever came next, whatever dangers they might face, she knew that her future was somehow bound to Sam Hawkins, a future she would choose freely, with full knowledge of its hardships and its joys. As dawn broke on the fourth day of their journey, the landscape began to change. The arid plains gave way to more varied terrain, grassy hills dotted with pine and aspen, streams running clear and cold from the higher elevations. The air felt different too, crisper and fresher than the dry heat of Arizona territory. Colorado, Sam announced as they crested a rise. Another day's ride to Clearwater. Dorothy took a deep breath of the mountain air. It's beautiful. Different kind of country, Sam agreed. Good cattle land, but harder winters than what I'm used to. They made camp beside a swift running stream, and Sam surprised Dorothy by pulling a fishing line and hooks from his saddlebag. Thought we might have fresh trout for breakfast, he explained with a boyish grin that made her heart flutter. If you're not too tired to wait a bit longer for your meal. I'd wait all day for fresh fish, Dorothy assured him. Can I help? Sam showed her how to bait the hook with grubs he found under rocks, and together they sat on the bank, lines trailing in the clear water. It felt strangely domestic, this shared moment of quiet pursuit, and Dorothy found herself imagining many such mornings in the future. Tell me about your cousin, she said, as they waited for the fish to bite. The one we're going to visit. Ellen's my mother's sister's girl, Sam replied. A few years older than me, she came west with her first husband, but he died in a mining accident. Met Sheriff Daniel Porter about 5 years back and married him the same year. They've got 2 little ones now. And they'll truly welcome a stranger? Dorothy asked, doubt creeping into her voice. Sam's hand covered hers briefly. You won't be a stranger. You'll be my friend who needs help. That's all Ellen needs to know. His line suddenly jerked, and Sam leapt to his feet with a whoop of triumph. Got one, he exclaimed, reeling in a good-sized rainbow trout that thrashed and glittered in the morning light. Dorothy laughed at his enthusiasm, a sound that died in her throat when she spotted movement on the ridge behind him. A rider sat silhouetted against the sky, watching them. Sam, she whispered urgently, nodding toward the ridge. Sam turned slowly, his hand dropping to his pistol. The rider remained motionless for a long moment, then raised a hand in greeting before turning his horse and disappearing over the ridge. Was that, Dorothy began, one of Henderson's men? Maybe, Sam said grimly, or could be just a curious traveler. Either way, we should move on. They quickly packed their belongings, the fish forgotten. As they mounted up, Dorothy noticed Sam checking his rifle and pistol with extra care. Are you expecting trouble? She asked, fear tightening her chest. Always better to be prepared, he replied, his expression grim. If that was one of Henderson's men, others might not be far behind. They rode hard that day, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and take hurried meals. Sam kept them to less obvious trails, sometimes doubling back or crossing streams to break their trail. By late afternoon, Dorothy was exhausted, her still healing ankle throbbing, but she made no complaint. As dusk approached, they found themselves in a narrow valley flanked by steep, pine-covered slopes. Ahead, the trail wound between 2 massive rock formations that created a natural gateway. Eagle Pass, Sam explained. Once we're through, it's just a few hours to Clearwater. We'll stay on the trail until full dark, then make camp. But as they approached the pass, Sam suddenly reined in his horse, holding up a hand for Dorothy to do the same. He sat motionless, head tilted as though listening. What is it? Dorothy whispered. Not sure, he replied, scanning the rocks above. Something doesn't feel right. As if in answer to his suspicion, a voice called out from the rocks. That's far enough. Hawkins! Sam immediately moved his horse in front of Dorothy's, his hand going to his pistol. Show yourself, he demanded. Jenkins stepped from behind a boulder, rifle aimed steadily at them. "No need for gunplay if you surrender the woman peacefully." "How did you find us?" Sam asked, buying time as he assessed their situation. Dorothy could see him counting Jenkins wasn't alone. At least 2 other men were positioned among the rocks. "Wasn't hard to guess where you'd head," Jenkins replied with a cold smile. "Henderson has friends in Colorado, too. Been waiting for you since yesterday." Dorothy felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. They'd been outmaneuvered, led into a trap. "Miss Wells is under my protection," Sam stated firmly. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't choose to go." Jenkins spat on the ground. "This isn't about choice, Hawkins. It's about property. The woman's promised to Henderson, and she's got land he wants. Now step aside, or we start shooting." Sam turned slightly, meeting Dorothy's terrified gaze. "When I move," he said quietly, "ride hard back the way we came. Don't stop for anything." "I won't leave you," she protested. "You must," he insisted. "I'll find you." Before she could argue further, Sam drew his pistol with lightning speed and fired at Jenkins. The man dove for cover as the shot echoed through the pass. Simultaneously, Sam slapped Dorothy's horse hard on the rump, sending it bolting back down the trail. Gunfire erupted behind her as Dorothy clung desperately to her horse's mane. Tears streamed down her face. Partly from the wind and partly from fear for Sam, she heard more shots, then a terrible silence. A quarter-mile down the trail, Dorothy managed to regain control of her panicked horse. She reined in, heart pounding, listening for pursuit. The silence stretched ominously. "I can't leave him," she whispered to herself. But what could she do against armed men? She had no weapon, no plan. Then she remembered the small derringer Sam had given her on their second day of travel. "Just in case we get separated," he'd said. It was tucked into her boot, loaded with 2 precious bullets. Drawing a deep breath, Dorothy turned her horse and walked it quietly back toward the pass, staying close to the tree line for cover. As she approached, she heard men's voices. "Check the saddlebags. Henderson wants those land papers." Dorothy dismounted silently, tethered her horse, and crept forward on the foot. From behind a large pine, she could see the scene in the gathering dusk. Jenkins and another man ransacking their belongings, while a third man stood guard over. "Sam!" she gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth to stifle the sound. Sam was on his knees, hands bound behind him, blood streaming from a gash on his temple. He swayed slightly but remained conscious, his eyes burning with defiance as Jenkins approached him. "Where are the papers, Hawkins?" Jenkins demanded, delivering a brutal kick to Sam's ribs that made him double over in pain. "Don't have them," Sam gasped. "They're with a lawyer in Clearwater." Jenkins cursed. "You're lying. The woman had them. Where did she go?" Sam straightened, a ghost of a smile touching his bloodied lips. "Far from here by now. You'll never find her." Jenkins raised his pistol, pressing it to Sam's forehead. "Then you're no use to us, are you?" Dorothy's blood ran cold. Without conscious thought, she stepped from her hiding place. The small derringer aimed steadily at Jenkins. "Let him go," she commanded, her voice surprisingly strong despite her terror. All 3 men turned, momentary shock on their faces. Jenkins recovered first, a slow smile spreading beneath his mustache. "Well, well, the runaway bride returns." He kept his gun at Sam's head. "Drop that toy, Miss Wells, before someone gets hurt." "Dorothy, run!" Sam shouted, struggling against his bonds. Jenkins struck him across the face with his pistol. "Quiet, you!" Dorothy didn't flinch, keeping her aim on Jenkins. "I said, let him go, now." "Or what?" Jenkins sneered. "That little gun probably couldn't hit the side of a barn from where you're standing." "Perhaps not," Dorothy conceded. "But I'm aiming at your face, Mr. Jenkins, not a barn. I like my chances." Something in her tone must have convinced him she was serious. Jenkins hesitated, reassessing the woman before him. "What do you propose?" he asked cautiously. "A trade," Dorothy said. "Me for him. You let Sam go, unharmed, and I'll return to Mr. Henderson willingly." "No!" Sam shouted, earning himself another blow. Jenkins considered her offer. "How do I know you won't try to escape again?" "You don't," Dorothy replied honestly. But it's your best chance of completing your mission. Kill him, and I promise you'll have to kill me too. Mr. Henderson won't be pleased to receive a corpse instead of a bride. A tense silence fell over the pass as Jenkins weighed his options. Finally, he nodded. All right, throw down your gun and we have a deal. Not until he's free, Dorothy insisted. Cut his bonds, give him his horse, and let him ride away. Then I'll surrender. Jenkins hesitated, then nodded to one of his men. Do it, but keep your rifle on him. Dorothy watched anxiously as the man sliced through Sam's bonds and roughly pulled him to his feet. Sam swayed dangerously but managed to stay upright, his eyes never leaving Dorothy's. Don't do this, he pleaded. They'll kill you once they have what they want. No, they won't, Dorothy said, with more confidence than she felt. Mr. Henderson wants me alive. Your horse is there, Jenkins told Sam, gesturing to where their mounts were tethered. Get on it and ride. Try anything, and we shoot both of you. Sam didn't move. I won't leave her. You must, Dorothy said, echoing his earlier words. Please, Sam, trust me. Their eyes locked in silent communication, a promise, a farewell, a declaration unspoken but understood. Finally, Sam nodded fractionally and began moving toward the horses, the guard's rifle trained on his back. Dorothy kept her gun steady on Jenkins, knowing her moment of leverage would end once Sam was gone, but she had to give him a chance, even if it meant sacrificing her own freedom. Sam had just reached the horses when a new sound broke the tense silence: hoofbeats, many of them approaching rapidly from the direction of Clearwater. Boss, the third man called urgently. Riders coming, Jenkins cursed. How many? Can't tell. Sounds like a lot. Dorothy felt a surge of hope. Could it be help? Or just travelers who might inadvertently make the situation worse? Jenkins made a split-second decision. Grab the woman. We're leaving. As one of the men lunged toward her, Dorothy fired her derringer. The shot went wide, but it startled her attacker enough that Sam was able to tackle him, despite his injuries. They went down in a tangle of limbs just as the first riders appeared at the far end of the pass. Sheriff's posse! Hold it right there! A commanding voice bellowed. In the ensuing chaos, Dorothy found herself pulled behind a boulder by Sam, his body shielding hers as gunfire erupted once more. It ended almost as quickly as it began, with Jenkins and one of his men throwing down their weapons while the third lay motionless on the ground. You all right? Sam asked urgently, his hands gentle on her shoulders despite the blood still streaming down his face. I'm fine, she assured him, touching his cheek. But you're hurt. Worth it, he said with a pained smile. Then he looked toward the approaching riders. That's Daniel Ellen's husband. How did he know? A tall man with a silver badge dismounted and strode toward them, 6 armed men behind him. Sam Hawkins, he called, relief evident in his voice. When we got your telegram yesterday saying you were bringing trouble our way, I figured I'd better meet you halfway. Telegram? Dorothy repeated, confused. When did you send a telegram? At our second stop, Sam admitted, while you were resting. Didn't want to worry you, but I suspected Henderson might have men watching the trails to Clearwater. Sheriff Porter reached them, eyeing Sam's bloody face with concern. Looks like I was right to come. Who are these Jaspers? Henderson's men, Sam explained, accepting the sheriff's help to stand. Dorothy refused to marry him, so he sent them to fetch her back by force if necessary. The sheriff turned to Dorothy with a respectful nod. Madam, my wife's been looking forward to meeting you. She's got the guest room already. Thank you, Sheriff, Dorothy said, still trying to process the rapid turn of events. But I'm not sure I'll be imposing on your hospitality after all. Both men looked at her questioningly. If Mr. Hawkins is agreeable, she continued, gathering her courage, I believe I'd prefer to return to Arizona with him. Sam's expression transformed from confusion to joy so quickly it made Dorothy's heart skip. Are you certain? He asked softly. What about taking time, being sure? Dorothy stepped closer to him, uncaring of their audience. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Samuel Hawkins. I love you. I think I have since you rode out of the Dusk and found me in the desert. Sam pulled her into his arms, mindful of his injuries but unable to maintain distance any longer. I love you too, Dorothy Wells. Have from the first moment I saw you, all courage and defiance despite being hurt and alone. Sheriff Porter cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, this is all very touching, but maybe we should get Sam's head looked at before you two make any more life decisions. And we've got prisoners to deal with. Sam reluctantly released Dorothy, but kept her hand firmly in his. What about Henderson? He asked the sheriff. He won't take this lying down. Let me worry about Henderson, Porter replied grimly. Man's influence only stretches so far, and threatening a woman, sending armed men to kidnap her, that's beyond the pale even for these parts. There's also the matter of my father's land, Dorothy added. It rightfully belongs to me, not Mr. Henderson. We'll sort that out too, the sheriff assured her. My wife's brother is the best lawyer in the territory. Between us, we'll make sure Henderson doesn't profit from his schemes. As the sheriff's men secured Jenkins and his surviving companion, Sam turned to Dorothy once more. You're sure about this? About us? Life at Shadowbrook won't be easy. Dorothy smiled, reaching up to gently wipe blood from his temple with her handkerchief. I'm sure. Besides, I've seen how you run that ranch. You could use someone to keep your books, mend your shirts, and remind you to come in for dinner instead of working until you drop. Sam laughed, then winced at the pain it caused his ribs. Is that a proposal, Miss Wells? Perhaps it is, Mr. Hawkins, she replied, her cheeks flushing, though it's terribly improper of me. I've never cared much for proper, Sam said, bending to press his forehead gently against hers. But if it matters to you, I'll do this right. Before she could ask what he meant, Sam lowered himself carefully to one knee, still holding her hand in his. Dorothy Wells, he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence that fell over the pass. You came into my life like a miracle, tossed from a stagecoach at dusk into a world you didn't understand. I said you were mine then because I couldn't bear to leave you alone in the desert. I say it again now for a different reason. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Will you be my wife? Not because you have no choice, not because of convenience or necessity, but because we choose each other freely and completely? Dorothy's vision blurred with tears as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Finally, she managed a whispered, yes. Oh, Sam, yes. As Sam rose to his feet and pulled her into a tender embrace, Dorothy heard Sheriff Porter muttering to one of his men, Ellen's gonna be mighty disappointed she missed this. Been trying to marry Sam off for years. Later, as they rode toward Clearwater, Dorothy on her own horse but never far from Sam's side, she reflected on the strange journey that had led her here. From the terror of being abandoned in the desert to the joy of finding love in the most unexpected place, every step had somehow been necessary to bring her to this moment. What are you thinking about? Sam asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. About how sometimes what seems like the worst moment of your life can lead to the best, she replied. If that stage hadn't been attacked, if that cowardly salesman hadn't thrown me out, if I hadn't decided to investigate why a stagecoach was racing through my grazing land, Sam added with a smile, exactly. So many chances for our paths never to have crossed. Dorothy reached across the space between them to touch his arm. I'm grateful for all of it, even the frightening parts. As am I, Sam agreed, his eyes warm with promise. Though I could have done without getting my head split open. Dorothy laughed, the sound bright and free in the mountain air. When we tell our grandchildren this story someday, we'll say their grandfather heroically fought off a dozen desperados to save me. Grandchildren, huh? Sam's smile widened. Getting ahead of yourself, aren't you? Just planning for the future, Dorothy replied with a blush. Our future. As the lights of Clearwater appeared in the valley below, Dorothy felt a certainty settle in her heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Henderson's retribution. The legal battle for her father's land, the hardships of ranch life, they would face them together. She was no longer a desperate bride, cast adrift in a harsh land. She was a woman who had found her place, her purpose, and her love. 3 months later, Dorothy stood in Ellen Porter's parlor, allowing her new friend to make final adjustments to her wedding dress. Unlike the elaborate gown she'd worn on the ill-fated stagecoach journey, this dress was simple but elegant ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Stop fidgeting, Ellen scolded good-naturedly, pins held between her lips as she worked on the hem. You'd think you were facing a firing squad instead of marrying my favorite cousin." Dorothy laughed nervously. "I can hardly believe this day is really here. So much has happened." Indeed, the past months had been eventful. With Sheriff Porter's help and the legal expertise of his brother-in-law, they had successfully challenged Calvin Henderson's claim to Jonathan Wells's land. The discovery that Henderson had forged documents and bribed officials had led to his arrest and disgrace, his empire crumbling as other victims came forward with similar stories. Sam and Dorothy had remained in Clearwater during the legal proceedings, their courtship blossoming under the approving eyes of the Porter family. When the case was finally settled, granting Dorothy full ownership of her father's property, Sam had surprised her with a proposal not of marriage, which he'd already offered, but of partnership. "The Wells land adjoins Shadowbrook's northern boundary," he'd explained, maps spread across the Porter's dining table. "Combined, they'd make one of the largest spreads in the territory. With the water rights from your father's claim, we could expand the herd, maybe try some new breeding stock." Dorothy had been touched by his assumption that her land would remain hers, not automatically becoming his property upon marriage as the law allowed. It was one more confirmation that she'd found a rare man in Samuel Hawkins. "There," Ellen said, sitting back on her heels to admire her work. "Perfect. Sam won't know what hit him when he sees you coming down that aisle." Dorothy turned to the mirror, hardly recognizing the confident woman who looked back at her. Gone was the frightened, desperate mail-order bride who'd been tossed from a stagecoach at dusk. In her place stood a woman who had found her strength, her voice, and her heart. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "It's time, ladies," called Sheriff Porter. "Everyone's seated and the minister's ready. Sam looks like he might pass out from nerves, so you might want to hurry before he bolts." Ellen laughed, opening the door to her husband. Sam Hawkins, bolt from marrying the love of his life? Not likely. Daniel Porter offered his arm to Dorothy. "Ready, Miss Wells? Last chance to escape before you're saddled with that ornery cowboy for life." Dorothy took his arm with a confident smile. "I've done enough escaping to last a lifetime, Sheriff. This is one commitment I'm eager to make." The small church in Clearwater was filled with well-wishers, the Porter's friends who had become Dorothy's friends, Sam's ranch hands who had traveled from Shadowbrook for the occasion, including Maria, who wept openly in the front pew, and even a few of Dorothy's father's old associates who had come to witness the union of Jonathan Wells's daughter to the respected rancher Samuel Hawkins. But Dorothy saw none of them as she walked down the aisle. Her eyes were fixed on Sam, standing tall and handsome before the altar, his usually weathered face alight with joy as he watched her approach. He'd traded his usual cowboy attire for a fine black suit, though Dorothy noted with amusement that he couldn't quite bring himself to give up his boots. When she reached him, Sam took her hands in his voice low and meant only for her. "You are the most beautiful sight I've ever seen, Dorothy Wells." "Soon to be Dorothy Hawkins," she reminded him with a smile. "The luckiest name change in history," he replied, squeezing her hands gently. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, their vows spoken with quiet conviction. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sam's kiss was tender but held a promise that made Dorothy blush. The celebration afterward at the Porter home lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more good wishes than Dorothy had ever imagined receiving. As the night grew late, she found herself on the porch with Sam, stealing a moment of quiet amid the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Hawkins?" he asked, his arm around her waist as they gazed at the star-filled sky. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And you?" "I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this was all a dream," Sam admitted. "That I never rode back to investigate that stagecoach. Never found you in the desert." Dorothy turned in his arms to face him. "It's no dream, Samuel Hawkins. I'm real. This is real, and I'm not going anywhere." "Good," he murmured, bending to kiss her. "Because I meant what I said that night. You're mine, Dorothy Hawkins, and I'm yours, from now until forever." The following morning, they departed for Shadowbrook Ranch, traveling in a wagon laden with wedding gifts and supplies for their new life together. The journey would take several days, retracing the route they'd taken in their desperate flight months earlier, but this time without fear, without pursuers, without uncertainty. As they camped the first night, beside the same creek where Sam had tried to catch trout, Dorothy found herself recalling the frightened woman she'd been then. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, echoing his question from that earlier journey as he settled beside her at the campfire. "About how much has changed," she replied. "How much I've changed." Sam studied her face in the firelight. "You've grown stronger, more sure of yourself. But the essentials were always there: courage, determination, compassion." "As were yours," Dorothy said, reaching for his hand. "My hero from the very beginning." Sam chuckled. "Some hero. I remember being half terrified you'd reject my help, insist on making your own way." "I considered it," Dorothy admitted with a laugh, "for about half a second. Then I realized a sprained ankle and a torn wedding dress weren't ideal equipment for surviving alone in the Arizona desert." "Smart woman," Sam said, pulling her closer. "One of the many reasons I fell in love with you." As they held each other beneath the vast canopy of stars, Dorothy reflected on the journey that had brought her west, not just the physical journey from Philadelphia to Arizona, but the spiritual one from dependent daughter to mail order, bride to independent woman who had chosen her own path, her own partner, her own future. "Sam," she said softly, "do you ever wonder what might have happened if things had been different? If the stage hadn't been attacked, if I had reached Silver Creek and married Henderson as planned?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, his hand gently stroking her hair. "I try not to dwell on might-have-beens," he said finally, "but I like to think our paths would have crossed eventually, perhaps at a cattle auction or a town social. I'd have seen you on Henderson's arm and known instantly that you deserve better." Dorothy smiled at his conviction. "And would you have rescued me then too?" "If you'd wanted rescuing," he replied. "Though I suspect you'd have found your own way eventually, with or without my help. You're stronger than you know, Dorothy Hawkins." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But I'm grateful I didn't have to find out. Grateful that, when I was tossed from that stagecoach at dusk, it was you who rode back and claimed me." Sam's arms tightened around her. "Best decision I ever made, saying you're mine, to a bedraggled woman in a torn wedding dress." Dorothy laughed, lifting her face for his kiss. "And the best decision I ever made was believing you." 5 years later, Dorothy stood on the porch of the expanded Shadowbrook Ranch house, watching as Sam taught their 3-year-old son, Jack, to sit atop his first pony. Their daughter Emily, just turned 5, was already an accomplished rider, circling the corral on her own pinto pony, with the confidence of a child born to the saddle. "Mama, look!" Jack called, his chubby hands gripping the saddle horn while Sam led the gentle pony in a slow circle. "I'm riding like Papa." "I see you, sweetheart," Dorothy called back, one hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child grew. "You're a natural cowboy." From the corral, Sam looked up, his face softening as it always did when he gazed at his wife. 5 years of marriage had only deepened their love, each challenge and triumph binding them more tightly together. The combined Wells-Hawkins ranch had prospered beyond their expectations, their innovative breeding program and careful management making Shadowbrook one of the most successful operations in the territory. Maria emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Though she had threatened to retire when Emily was born, the older woman remained an integral part of their household, more grandmother than housekeeper to the Hawkins children. "Supper's ready whenever those cowboys of yours are done playing," she informed Dorothy with a fond smile. "Though you should sit down before you fall down. That baby's riding low today." Dorothy obediently settled into one of the porch rocking chairs. "The midwife says it won't be long now. Another week, perhaps 2. "Another boy, I'm thinking," Maria said with the certainty of long experience. "You're carrying the same way you did with Jack." "Sam's hoping for another girl," Dorothy confided. "He says Emily needs a sister to balance out all the male influence around here." Maria chuckled. "That man would be happy if you gave him a dozen daughters, each one as spirited as their mama." "Let's not get carried away," Dorothy laughed. 3 children is quite enough for now." As the sun began to set, painting the landscape in the same golden hues Dorothy remembered from her first evening in this land, Sam called an end to the riding lesson. He lifted Jack from the pony, settled him on his shoulders, and took Emily's hand as they walked toward the house. The sight of her husband and children approaching, backlit by the sunset, filled Dorothy with such overwhelming love and gratitude that tears sprang to her eyes. "You all right?" Sam asked as they reached the porch, his keen gaze noting her emotional state immediately. "Just happy," Dorothy assured him, accepting his kiss as he bent to greet her. Remembering how all this began, Sam smiled, understanding in his eyes. They had made a tradition of telling their children the story of how they met a suitably edited version that emphasized the rescue and downplayed the danger on each anniversary of that fateful day. "Mama was a brave lady lost in the desert," Jack recited, clearly proud of remembering the story. "And Papa found her and said, 'You mine now,' and brought her home to live happy ever after." "That's right, little man," Sam agreed, setting his son down. "Best thing I ever did was finding your mama." "And the smartest thing I ever did was letting myself be found," Dorothy added, accepting Sam's help to rise from the rocking chair. As they entered their home, the home they had built together, filled with love and laughter and the promise of future generations, Dorothy thought again of that terrified bride tossed from a stagecoach into the unknown. How could she have imagined, in that moment of fear and abandonment, that she was actually falling into the life she was meant to live, with the man she was meant to love? Sometimes she reflected as Sam's arm circled her waist, the most frightening moments of our lives are simply the first steps on the path to our greatest joy. All we need is the courage to keep walking forward, and perhaps, if we're truly blessed, someone to walk beside us, guiding us through the gathering dusk into the promise of a new dawn.